I never imagined I would be the type of woman to even entertain the idea. But then again, I never expected my daughter's husband to make me feel this way. It all began with minor things: a lingering glance across the dinner table, a knowing smile, a fleeting touch that lasted just a fraction longer than it should have. I ought to have disregarded it, laughed it off, convinced myself it was all in my imagination. But deep down, I understood the truth. I recognized it in the way he gazed at me, in the excuses he made to be near me, and what frightened me the most, I enjoyed it. Mark had been married to my daughter for 3 years. He was tall, strong, the kind of man who carried himself with a quiet self-assurance. He was a few years younger than me, yet mature enough to fully grasp the effect he had. He and Sarah had met in college, and while I cherished my daughter deeply, I couldn't ignore the way my eyes lingered on him. He was the sort of man women noticed, and I had noticed him. Initially, it was harmless, a simple, innocent appreciation, or so I assured myself. After all, I wasn't blind, but admiration gradually transformed into temptation, and temptation soon escalated into something far more perilous. It truly began during their housewarming party. Sarah and Mark had recently purchased a stunning home on the outskirts of town, a picture-perfect place with a vast backyard and a charming little guest house. They invited close family and friends to celebrate, and of course, I attended with my husband, Daniel. While helping Sarah in the kitchen, I suddenly felt a presence behind me, so close that his breath brushed against my neck. "You always look incredible," Mark murmured, his voice so low only I could hear. My hands froze over the cutting board, my heartbeat pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Thank you, Mark. That's very kind." "Kind isn't the word I'd use," he replied, stepping back just before Sarah could turn around. The warmth of his presence, the weight of his words, lingered long after he had walked away. From that moment on, it became a game, an intoxicating, dangerous game. He found every excuse to touch me, a light hand grazing the small of my back as he passed by, his fingers brushing mine whenever I handed him something. Each time, I convinced myself it was nothing, meaningless, but in my heart, I knew I was deceiving myself. The true turning point came one evening when I was alone in their house. Sarah had asked me to drop something off while she was at work, and I assumed Mark wouldn't be home either. But he was. I stepped inside, calling his name, and he emerged from the hallway, wearing nothing but a towel slung loosely around his hips. Water trailed down his chest, his damp hair tousled from the shower. "Didn't realize you'd be stopping by," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. I turned away quickly, pretending I was unfazed, but my body betrayed me. Heat flushed up my neck, my breath caught in my throat. "Just dropping something off for Sarah," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He stepped closer, his bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. "You're always so good to her." I forced a laugh attempting to keep things light. Well, she is my daughter. He nodded, but his eyes never wavered from mine. And you? I frowned, confused. What about me? Who takes care of you? The question hit me harder than I expected. My marriage with Daniel had settled into a predictable routine, comfortable but devoid of passion. He was a good man, yet the spark between us had long since faded. And Mark was standing too close, his gaze locked onto mine, his intentions unmistakable. "Mark," I warned, but my voice lacked the conviction I intended. He reached out, his fingertips tracing the inside of my wrist, sending a shiver down my spine. "You can tell me to stop," he murmured, watching me intently. "But I don't think you will." I should have pulled away. I should have left. But instead, I stood there, letting the moment stretch between us, the air thick with something dangerous and impossible to ignore. And in that instant, I realized I was already in too deep. That night, I couldn't get him out of my head. The way he had looked at me, the way his touch had felt, the moment that nearly happened. I lay in bed beside my husband, staring at the ceiling, replaying every stolen glance, every subtle touch, every breathless second, and I despised myself for wanting more. The next time I saw Mark, he didn't mention what had happened at the house, but the way he looked at me spoke volumes. That was when I understood. He had figured out my weakness, and he intended to exploit it. I should have stopped it before it even began. I should have convinced myself it was nothing more than a fleeting infatuation, a mirage conjured by loneliness and unfulfilled longing. But some temptations bury themselves so deeply within you that no amount of logic or self-restraint can uproot them. Days went by, and I told myself to forget it, to act as if nothing had happened, as if the tension between us was all in my imagination. But I knew better. The way he watched me during family gatherings, the subtle ways he found reasons to be near me, it was all intentional. He was fully aware of his effect on me. And worse, he knew exactly how to use it to his advantage. The ultimate breaking point came one evening when I was home alone. Daniel had left on a business trip, left alone in an empty house with too much time on my hands. I poured a glass of wine, convincing myself I'd take a bath and get to bed early. But then my phone vibrated. A message from Mark. "Thinking about you." Just 4 simple words, seemingly innocent, yet they sent a shiver racing down my spine. A surge of adrenaline shot through me, making my fingers hesitate above the screen. I should have ignored it. I should have put my phone down and walked away. But I didn't. "You shouldn't be texting me that." His reply was immediate. "Then tell me to stop." I didn't. Instead, I just stared at the message, my heartbeat so forceful I could feel it in my throat. I understood exactly what he was doing, testing me, waiting for me to give in. And against all logic, I wanted to. Taking a deep breath, I placed my phone down and stepped away. But it was too late. The thought had already been planted deep in my mind, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake it. The next time I saw him was at a family barbecue. Sarah was laughing with friends, completely oblivious to the way Mark's gaze tracked my every movement across the backyard. My palms were clammy, my pulse erratic. I shouldn't have come. I should have made up an excuse, found a way to avoid him entirely. But there I was, ensnared in the dangerous game we had started playing. At one point, I found myself alone in the kitchen, refilling a pitcher of iced tea. The soft click of the door closing behind me sent a ripple of awareness through my body. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Did you get my message?" His voice was low, teasing. I let out a slow breath, gripping the counter. "You can't do this, Mark." He moved in closer, his warmth seeping into me, the air between us crackling with tension. "Then tell me to stop." I turned to face him, my breathing shallow, my resolve splintering. "We can't." His gaze flickered to my lips, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you want to." I hated how right he was. My body betrayed me, drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. Outside, I could hear the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the hum of casual conversation, people utterly unaware of the storm raging inside me. His fingers brushed against mine, the lightest of touches, yet it sent a jolt of heat through me. I should have pulled away. Instead, I let the moment stretch, the tension coil tighter until it felt impossible to breathe. "Mark," I murmured, my voice shaky, uncertain. Then the back door swung open, and we jolted apart. Sarah entered, smiling, blissfully unaware of what had just transpired. I busied myself with the pitcher, my hands trembling as I poured the tea. From that moment on, everything shifted. Stolen glances turned into secret rendezvous. Lingering touches evolved into something more. I found myself spinning lie after lie, small excuses for why I needed to run errands, explanations for why I was late getting home. Each time I saw him, guilt twisted like a knife in my gut, but it wasn't enough to make me stop. One night, with Daniel out of town again, Mark texted me, "Come outside." My hands trembled as I walked to the front door, my pulse hammering in my ears. He was there, leaning against his car, every inch the temptation I knew he was. The moment I stepped outside, he seized my wrist, pulling me to him, his lips crashing into mine. It was reckless, dangerous, but I didn't care. The tension had built for too long, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. We ended up in his car, parked on a quiet street, hands desperate, bodies entwined. I knew it was wrong. I knew I should stop, but he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years, made me forget the rules, the consequences. Yet, when it was over, when reality came rushing back in, the weight of what we had done settled over me like a crushing force. Mark studied me, his expression unreadable. "You regret it?" I shook my head, though I knew I should. "No," he smirked, leaning in. "Good, because this isn't the last time." And he was right. It wasn't. Every time I swore it had to end, Every time I promised myself I wouldn't give in again, Mark found a way to pull me back under. He knew my vulnerabilities, knew exactly how to unravel my defenses. And the worst part? I let him, again and again. The stolen moments turned into carefully orchestrated meetings. The brief touches became long, drawn-out encounters that left me breathless, craving more. It wasn't just the thrill of secrecy anymore. It was something deeper, something I refused to name, because giving it a name would make it real. And if it became real, it would be even more dangerous than it already was. One afternoon, I was supposed to be running errands. Instead, I was in a hotel room with Mark, the air thick with the scent of us, the sheets tangled from the chaos we had created. He lay beside me, one arm draped lazily over my waist, his fingers tracing slow, teasing circles on my bare skin. You ever think about what would happen if they ever discovered the truth? His tone was casual, almost indifferent, yet there was an underlying challenge in it. I swallowed hard, my gaze fixed on the ceiling. Don't talk about that. He pushed himself up on one elbow, his smirk sending a shudder through me. Why not? You enjoy the thrill, don't you? I turned my head to meet his eyes, my stomach twisting because he wasn't wrong. The secrecy, the danger, it was exhilarating. But a part of me, the part still clinging to reason, understood that we were balancing on a precarious edge with no safety net. I don't want to think about it, I admitted. Mark chuckled, brushing his lips against my shoulder. Then don't. And just like that, I let myself get swept up in him again, allowing his warmth to consume me, making me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. But the euphoria never lasted. It never did. Because the moment I returned home, stepping inside the house I shared with my husband, the weight of reality came crashing back down. Daniel welcomed me with a kind smile, pressed a kiss to my cheek, and asked about my day. I lied. I had become adept at lying, too skilled. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed. The first crack appeared at a family gathering. Sarah and Mark had invited us for dinner, just a simple evening with family. But the second I walked in and saw Mark standing there, his gaze lingering on me just a fraction too long, I knew this was going to be a problem. I tried to act natural, to avoid his eyes, but he wasn't making it easy. He was becoming bolder, more reckless, finding reasons to brush past me, locking eyes across the room, letting his fingers graze mine when no one was looking. And maybe I was just as reckless because I allowed it. But Sarah wasn't oblivious. I caught her watching at one point, her brows slightly drawn together, lips pressed in a tight line. For the first time since this all began, a real sense of fear gripped me. Because if anyone was going to piece it together, it would be her. That night, I made a conscious effort to keep my distance from Mark. I kept our conversations short, ensured we were never alone. But I could feel his frustration. And when I stepped into the kitchen to grab something, he followed. I barely had a chance to react before he had me pressed against the counter, his hands gripping my hips, his lips dangerously close to mine. "What are you doing?" I hissed, pushing against him, but he didn't budge. "I don't like this little game you're playing," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. I glared at him, my heart pounding. Sarah's watching, then let her watch. His grip tightened, sending a shiver through me. I shoved him hard, slipping from his hold, my breath uneven. "We can't do this here." He studied me for a moment, then smirked. "You're the one who keeps saying we can't, yet we keep doing it anyway." Before I could reply, the kitchen door swung open. Sarah stepped in, her gaze flicking between us, something unreadable in her expression. "What's going on?" I forced a smile, stepping away from Mark. "Just grabbing more wine." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes lingered on Mark, then shifted to me, and I saw it. That brief hesitation, the creeping doubt. I grabbed the bottle and walked past her, steadying my breath, forcing myself to act natural. But I felt her eyes on me the entire way out of the kitchen. Later that night, after dinner, I stepped outside for air. My mind raced, my pulse still erratic from the close call in the kitchen. I needed to think, needed to figure out how to stop everything from falling apart. Then I felt him. Mark approached from behind, standing close enough for me to feel his warmth. "You're scared," he murmured. I turned to face him, my jaw tightening. "You should be too." He smirked, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "But I'm not." I swallowed hard. "Sarah's suspicious." He shrugged. "Let her be." I searched his face for any sign of worry, but there was none. He was enjoying this. The risk, the excitement, the possibility of being caught. And maybe that should have been my breaking point, the moment I finally walked away. Maybe that should have been my wake-up call. But instead, I let him kiss me. And as much as I wanted to believe I was still in control, I knew I was too far gone. I told myself this had to stop, that this was the last time, the final mistake I would allow. But even as I stood there, breathless from Mark's kiss, I knew I was lying, not just to him, but to myself. The truth was, I didn't want it to end. The danger, the tension, the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years, it was addictive, and it was going to destroy me. Sarah's suspicions had planted a seed, one that only grew each time I caught her watching me too closely, every time her words felt just a little too deliberate. She knew something wasn't right. Maybe she hadn't pieced it all together yet, but it was only a matter of time. After that night, I avoided Mark as much as I could, as much as I craved him, as much as my body ached for his touch. I knew the risk was too great, because if Sarah found out, if Daniel found out, everything would come undone. I kept trying to remind myself of everything I stood to lose. A family, a marriage, a life I had painstakingly built over the years. But none of that seemed to matter to Mark. One evening, as I stepped out of the grocery store, I spotted him waiting beside my car. My pulse thundered in my chest, my grip tightening around the cart handle as I froze. "Mark, what are you doing here?" I hissed, my gaze darting around anxiously. He lounged against my car, arms folded across his chest, that infuriating smirk playing on his lips. "You've been avoiding me." I let out a sharp breath. We can't keep doing this. Sarah is getting suspicious. Mark tilted his head slightly, as if mulling over my words. Then, without warning, he moved in, pressing me against the car's side. My breath hitched, the familiar warmth of his body making my resolve falter. I don't believe you, he murmured, his fingers skimming over my wrist. I swallowed hard. Mark, before I could finish, he silenced me with a deep, possessive kiss, and for an instant I lost track of why I was supposed to resist. My body betrayed me, molding against him, my hands clutching at his shirt as if afraid he would vanish. Then, the abrupt slam of a car door nearby yanked me back to reality. I pushed him away, my breathing ragged as my eyes scanned the parking lot. No one appeared to have noticed, but the fear had already taken root, twisting in my stomach. This is reckless, I whispered, my voice unsteady. Mark raked a hand through his hair, his eyes shadowed with something unreadable. Then stop pretending you don't want this. I loathed how right he was, but I couldn't keep this up. It was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. I had to put an end to it, permanently. So, I did the only thing I could. I walked away. I ignored his calls, his messages. I came up with reasons to avoid family events, to stay away from him. It was agonizing, like trying to break free from an addiction that had sunk its claws deep into me. But I forced myself to do it. And for a while, it worked, until it didn't. One evening, I came home to find Sarah seated at my kitchen table, a glass of wine in her hand, her expression unreadable. My heart faltered. Sarah, I said, forcing a smile. What are you doing here? She placed her glass down, studying me closely. I needed to talk to you. I swallowed, feeling the weight of her stare. About what? She hesitated before taking a slow breath. Mark, the floor beneath me seemed to tilt. I struggled to keep my face neutral, my fingers curling into fists at my sides. What about him? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at her wine, swirling the liquid absent-mindedly before finally locking eyes with me. I don't know what's going on between you two, she said, her tone measured, deliberate. But something feels off. I forced out a laugh, shaking my head. Sarah, you're imagining things. She didn't look convinced. Am I? My pulse roared in my ears. I had to regain control, to steer this conversation away before she uncovered too much. I reached for the wine bottle, pouring myself a glass with a hand I prayed wouldn't tremble. You're being paranoid, I said lightly. Mark is your husband. I'm your mother. Do you really think? She cut me off with a sharp look. I don't know what to think. A heavy silence stretched between us, suffocating in its weight. At last, she sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. I hope I'm wrong. I took a slow sip of my wine, forcing myself to meet her gaze. You are. She studied me a moment longer, then nodded, as if convincing herself to believe it. I should go. she murmured, standing. I walked her to the door, my heart hammering with every step. When she turned to hug me, I held on just a fraction too long. Once she was gone, I leaned against the door, pressing a hand to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. I had narrowly avoided disaster for now, but I knew this wasn't over, not even close. Sleep never came that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with all the ways this could fall apart. Sarah wasn't convinced, and that terrified me more than anything. I had been careful, but maybe not careful enough. I thought of Mark, of the way he touched me, the way he made me feel, the way he made me forget the consequences just long enough to make the risk seem worth it. But now the exhilaration was fading, replaced by something colder, heavier. The next day I dodged Sarah's calls, convincing myself she would let it go, that she had no proof, that this was nothing more than paranoia. Deep inside I had a feeling, but I ignored it. She wasn't the kind of person to dismiss her instincts, and this time she was right. It wasn't until later that night that a knock echoed through my apartment, making my heart jolt. Even before I reached the door, I knew exactly who it would be. Mark stood there, his hands buried in his pockets, his jaw tight with tension. "We need to talk," he said. I hesitated, glancing behind me as though Sarah might somehow emerge from the darkness. "Not here," I murmured. He let out a sharp breath, but gave a slight nod. "Get in." I followed him outside, slipping into the passenger seat of his car, my pulse racing. He didn't speak right away, just stared straight ahead, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned pale. "Sarah knows," he finally said, his voice quiet. I swallowed hard. "She has suspicions." "That's enough." I turned toward him, my stomach twisting. "What do you want me to do?" Dragging a hand down his face, he let out a bitter laugh. "You're acting like you had no part in this." I flinched because he was right. I hadn't merely allowed it to happen. I had chosen it, over and over. And now, here we were, sitting in a dark car, trying to figure out how to keep our lives from completely falling apart. "We stop," I said at last, my voice barely above a whisper. "Before it's too late." Mark turned his head slowly, his gaze locking onto mine. "It already is." A shiver ran through me because deep down I knew he was right. Even if we never touched again, the damage was already done. The lies, the secrecy, all of it sitting there, waiting to unravel. "I love her," he said suddenly. "I love Sarah." A sharp pang shot through my chest. I shouldn't have been surprised, but hearing him say it still hurt. "Then prove it," I told him, my voice steadier than I felt. "Make her believe there's nothing going on." Mark exhaled, leaning back in his seat. "And you?" I forced a smile. "I have a marriage to save, too." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them because, in truth, I wasn't sure my marriage was salvageable. I had spent so long yearning for something more, And now that I had gotten a taste of it, how was I supposed to pretend everything was fine? Mark didn't respond, only nodded, gripping the wheel even tighter. "We end this," I whispered. "For good." And I meant it. At least, I wanted to. The following weeks were unbearable. I avoided Mark as much as I could, but family gatherings were torturous. I felt Sarah's eyes on me constantly, watching, waiting. I didn't know if she believed me or if she was simply looking for proof. But either way, I knew I was walking on dangerous ground. Meanwhile, Daniel remained blissfully unaware, carrying on as if nothing had changed. And in some twisted way, that was the most painful part. He never really saw me, not then, not ever. That was what had driven me toward Mark in the first place. But guilt is relentless. It lingers, gnaws at you until you can't ignore it anymore. And eventually, everything came crashing down. It was a Sunday afternoon when it finally happened. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after lunch when Sarah walked in. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there with her arms crossed, staring at me like she was putting together the final pieces of a puzzle she had already solved. At last, she spoke. "I need you to be honest with me." My hands tightened around the dish towel. "About what?" "Don't do that." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "I deserve the truth." I closed my eyes for a brief moment, knowing there was no way out of this. I could keep lying, keep pretending, but the look in her eyes told me she wouldn't believe it anyway. So I did the one thing I never imagined I would. I told her the truth. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a split second, I thought she might slap me. Instead, she took a step back, shaking her head. "You were supposed to be my mother." A lump rose in my throat. "I never wanted to hurt you." She let out a bitter laugh. "But you did." The silence that stretched between us was thick, heavy with everything that had been shattered. "I need time," she finally said. I nodded, my chest tight. "I understand." And then, just like that, she was gone. Mark left too, not immediately, but eventually. Their marriage didn't survive, and neither did mine. Daniel found out a few months later, not from Sarah, but because the guilt had become unbearable. It pressed down on me until I could hardly breathe. In the end, I lost everything: my husband, my daughter, my family, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I deserved.